I was just thinking how many times your dad must have come to, to watch the match from, from when he was a lad. He was born and bred in Bradford. He was lovely. He was kind, very affectionate, and he was just a good guy all round, really.
He was fun, daft. He was a comedian. He was strict, as in, there were rules, but he wasn't stern or scary or anything like that. And he was just Dad, yeah.
Yeah, we were good together. We really were good together. He was my soulmate. That's the way I could describe him, a soulmate.
Football was a big part of his life. He supported Bradford man and boy, and even when they were in the doldrums, which was quite often, he used to come to the matches and, we'd say, "Oh, I hope they win, Dad," and then he'd come back, "Did you win?" "No." And then when I got a little bit older, he started bringing me with him. He was really excited. He was really giddy. He was like a kid. When it was time for him to go, he came and gave my mum a proper kiss. He picked her up and spun around, and I'm like, "Oh, parent," that kind of thing. They'd got tickets to go in the stand specially because of it being the special match. And they'd only got 2, and Dad said, "Well, come anyway, and we might be able to get another ticket, and if not, we'll just stand where we always stand." And I said, "No, you're so looking forward to it, and you're so excited. You go." And I said, "And just give us a wave when the cameras come past." In reality, if I'd have gone, I wouldn't be here now.
When he was going and he got to the back door and he turned round and he just said to me, "Don't start cooking at your normal time," he said, "because I might be delayed getting home. Because there'll be a lot of people at this game." But he never came home at all.
Mum said she knew straight away.
It was like a light had been switched off.
But I said, "No, he's strong. He'll be busy because he'll have been helping people."
Our friends all went round to the different hospitals to see if he was there. He wasn't.
Born in the June, and by the September I was coming to reserve games in the pram. I'm Chris Ashton. I've been an Imps supporter all my life and was at Bradford on the unfortunate afternoon of the fire. It was the last game of the season. City could do nothing. 5th from bottom, couldn't move up or down, so we just had the one coach, 52 people on it going to see the end of season game, to be quite frank. I've always been involved with the club in various guises, through being a youngster onto committees, the Red Imps Association, and that got me obviously involved with the travel section with Bill Stacey. I was the junior organiser, Bill was the senior one. Jim West was a big mate of Bill's, and whereas Bill and I normally would have complimentaries and other people did in those days, rightly or wrongly, I said to Jim, oh no, you sit with Bill, obviously in the main stand there. I said, I'll go and stand with our lot because there weren't the seats. All of a sudden, 2 or 3 people were saying, look, over there. In the quickness of time, it struck, the whole thing was on fire. We was counting our fans back. Well, because most were stood where we were, they soon got back to the bus. And then eventually it hit us, with 2 people missing. Where's Bill and Jim? It was that simple. We made the decision to move off and went round the hospitals. Literally went in and said, we're the Lincoln City Party with 2 people missing. Has somebody called Bill Stacey or Jim West been brought in here? We never found anything out about poor old Jim. And then when we got out to Pinderfields, they said they did have a Mr. Stacey admitted, but obviously they couldn't tell us anything. And then we had to make the awful decision just to come back to Lincoln and back to the ground where we left with 52 and came back with 50. They never did find poor Jim as such, over a ring, I understand. Bill got took to Pinderfields, as we know, but, you know, terrible burns, and obviously had passed away there.
We went there to cover a celebration and a football match, and we ended up televising a tragedy. That football match wasn't shown live, that was being recorded on videotape. I said, look, we must get this tape to ITV Studios in Leeds so that it can be fed out, so that it can go on the news and people can see what tragedy is unfolding.
3,000 fans were packed into the main stand at Valley Parade when the fire broke out. Within 4.5 minutes, the entire stand was ablaze. Rafters fell onto the crowds as they scrambled frantically to escape. Police went into the stand to try and help young and old alike, but the speed with which the flames spread and the choking fumes made their task almost impossible.
Obviously it was on the television, and the young men in our ward were saying, oh, Bradford City's on fire, and we're saying, no, it won't be on fire. My name's Sylvia Coleman. I worked at the Bradford Royal Infirmary in St Luke's for 38 years, which was at the time the Burns Plastics Reconstructive Surgery Unit.
I was actually a day off on that day. We'd been out somewhere and we heard it on the radio that there'd been this big disaster, you know. They were sort of asking for any staff that were off duty to go in. My name's Geeta Chudasama, and in 1985 I was a 3rd year student nurse.
I'd just finished an early shift. I was working at St Luke's on my gynae ward. I remember the news coming through on the radio, and I could not believe that people had actually lost their lives. My name is Anne Devaney. I was a staff nurse working on a gynae ward at St Luke's Hospital the weekend of the fire.
The injured were rushed to 3 local hospitals as a major emergency plan swung into operation.
The hospital was basically going to power down so that they could deal with the influx of burns victims really over that weekend. So she approached me and said, C1's going to kind of close down. Will you go to J1? Now J1 was the plastics ward. I didn't hesitate. But at the same time, I said to my senior sister, I haven't done plastics, I didn't do it as a student. The only plastics experience I've ever had was as a student in A&E, and they were just minor burns. And she said, just go. They need troops on the ground, so to speak.
Well, most of the victims' burns were their hands, back of their heads, when they've been trying to escape or put fires out and things. We had 2 wards full, J1 and J2. There were people just everywhere.
Casualties, many of them badly burnt, were treated at 3 local hospitals.
Climbed over the first lot of blocks of seats and dropped in to where there were some steps. And then I got to the front stand and everybody was fighting to get onto the field, you see.
Your clothes were actually on fire.
And my clothes were on
Is your
fire.
coat still...
Yeah.
How bad did you got badly burnt?
I have got very bad, and on my back as well.
I had to be thrown more or less from the stand onto the ground. That's terrible.
I remember it was just chaos. They must have seen some horrific things, you know. Some of them were talking about it, some of them were just really in shock.
A young lad was looking for his grandma. I felt really bad because I couldn't tell him where his grandma was. We had no idea, just people everywhere. And then I found out the day after he actually died at his grandma at the fire itself. And that bothered me more than doing all these dressings for all these people, really, because it became a reality.
It was so warm, I've never realised anything like it before. Telling our minister last night, if I don't go to heaven, I know what it feels like down in the other place.
The bravery, courageous people had been through an awful lot of trauma. People were so positive and really thankful that they'd managed to escape. I mean, they'd obviously come close to death, a lot of them. I remember one of them telling me about an old gentleman that they were trying to escape with. A man that walked with 2 sticks, possibly in his 80s, had scaled a quite high wall, I think it was over 6 foot, to escape the flames. And it just made me realise just what you are able to do in an adrenaline-fueled situation when you think you're going to die.
This evening, many of the less seriously injured began to leave Bradford Infirmary, but dozens of others were still being treated for burns.
Our neighbours, they were an elderly couple in the 70s and they were at the march. When I was in the lecture theatre helping to do the dressings, all I kept thinking about is I wonder if they're going to come in, and then we subsequently found out that they lost their life. That's something that will always stay with me.
A few, like Duncan Firth from Baildon, have been luckier. He and his wife made a miraculous escape from the burning stand. She's now undergoing treatment at St Luke's Hospital in Bradford.
The burns are on my back and back to my leg and bottom, and around the back of my head, as you can see, in both hands.
Has it been very painful for you?
It's been painful, yes, it has been painful, but not as painful as I imagined it would be.
There was an awful lot of positivity, and we had visit after visit.
The Lord Mayor of Bradford was among those who visited injured survivors of the football inferno at the city's St Luke's Hospital this morning.
Those that are in terrific pain have been helped so much. Like each one has said, I can see today and I couldn't see yesterday, or the nursing staff, these girls have been so wonderful.
Bradford City were there, the team were there every day in their suits, very handsome young men. I was only 22, so I was quite impressed. I saw Margaret Thatcher.
She went on to meet hospital staff who cope with the emergency and talk to some of the patients still recovering from severe burns.
I learned a lot about human nature and about how strong and brave people can be in utterly terrifying circumstances.
At this day, this is becoming very apparent to patients who can communicate well with us, that they are beginning to recognise the fact that they are going to be disfigured and that they're going to be with us for a long time.
For me, myself, I looked after a lot of patients for months and months afterwards. We still working in the plastics, come to the dressing clinic, and a lot of us became friends. A lot of good came out of it.
There were fairly severe burns on J1, and this is how they developed the sling, isn't it? For hands to be nursed.
The burns at that time were Prof Sharp, obviously, He just happened to be the consultant in charge on the day of the fire.
Some of these patients have burns which are going to lead to some form of deformity and some form of problem with their hands and with their scalps. It's really very early to say exactly how deep many of these are, and the depth is very critical when it comes to the sort of injury and deformity they're going to get.
It was suggested that because I had 50% burns at the time that I probably wasn't going to survive. Professor David Sharp identified the needs that I had and the fact that something needed to be done to help me survive.
Matthew Wildman believes his survival was the greatest miracle of all.
One of the problems with burns, of course, is that you have liquids coming out of your body all the time. They need to try and keep you hydrated, and that can be quite difficult when you've got a number of burns in lots of different areas. So he started experimenting from that weekend, experimental surgeries on me every other day for a couple of weeks, and each thing he tried paid off, and they gradually rebuilt me.
He had very bad rheumatoid arthritis, and this of course affected his mobility, but also it influenced us in when we actually did the grafts, and we didn't know how well they would take, because he's more liable to infection, because steroids do render you more liable to infection, but he did very well. We were very pleased with the way that they took.
I think I was just amazed in a good way that things can be done and that I'm getting another chance and that there's wonderful people out there that will save your life.
Early Sunday morning and the first public tributes begin to arrive at Valley Parade.
What was notable about the fire disaster was that it was essentially a local disaster. Whilst people from Lincoln were caught up, the vast majority of those who were killed and those who were injured were local people.
In the words of 2 Samuel, a day of victory was turned into a day of mourning for all the people. Individuals and families are shocked and numbed with grief, and there are tears of sorrow, tears of sympathy, and tears of consolation being shed all over our city today as a whole community mourns.
Virtually everybody in the city, in the district, knew somebody or knew a family that had been involved in some way.
The city of Bradford continued to mourn its dead today.
It allowed for a real understanding in the community and a lot of genuine support from within the community.
The souls of the virtuous are in the hands of God. No torment shall ever touch them. In the eyes of the unwise, they did appear to die. Their leaving is an annihilation, but they're in peace.
Inside, about 700 mourners attended the service, among them civic leaders, players from the Bradford City side, and survivors of Saturday's tragedy.
The main priority was really the victims. It was those who were injured, it was those who had suffered the trauma. I mean, to be frank about it, there was little that could be done for the 56 who had died. The emphasis was very much upon the survivors. There were a number of memorials in Bradford. It culminated with a memorial at Valley Parade before the ground was finally demolished.
They came from all over the region, some to mourn, others to express their sympathy. Ahead of them the flowers, row on row, arranged on the blackened concrete and steel of what had been Valley Parade's main stand.
There was a lot of support from supporters around the country.
Among those who travelled from Lincolnshire, the players and officials of Lincoln City, arriving at the clubhouse as they had on the afternoon of May the 11th.
It sort of drew both clubs close together, to be honest with you. The outpouring of emotion, towards each club.
Behind the teams, firemen, policemen and ambulancemen, many of whom had been on duty on the day of the disaster.
I think the whole city rallied round. This sounds silly, but in a way it was a good thing for the city in that it brought people together.
We have come to Valley Parade as Bradfordians have been coming ever since the turn of the century. But today we have come because of the fire which broke out so suddenly and spread so rapidly on that fatal final day of last season.
Being respectful, I think it was quiet and everybody sort of listened to the words that were said. Everybody's way of thinking was football's there to be enjoyed, but it's irrelevant, when things like this have happened.
Inevitably, those who stood at Valley Parade yesterday now turn to the future. Children from 4 local schools gave out white carnations as a symbol of hope. The congregation expressed that hope with the song which has rung from the terraces for more than 20 years.
An appeal fund had been launched immediately after the fire.
Messages of sympathy have been flooding in from all over the world, with them offers of cash for the stricken city. A disaster fund has already been launched by the City Council together with the Telegraph and Argus newspaper and Pennine Radio, and a helpline has been set up to coordinate offers of assistance.
Donations are welcome at City Hall. The clearing banks are setting up a national network so that the money can be paid in at any bank and come to Bradford. The building societies are opening all their branches throughout the country.
Because of the coverage, there was tremendous sympathy for Bradford. There was a fund started. It was beautifully handled. There was a wonderful lawyer from Bradford called Roger Suddards who ran that whole thing, the distribution of the funds, very well indeed, and people were very happy and very satisfied with all of that.
We've made payments to people who were bereaved, we've paid funeral expenses, we have made payments to people who lost relatives in the fire. And as to date, we've paid out about £450,000–500,000.
It was very successful in terms of how much it generated and also galvanising support and energies among supporters and the local population.
The whole of Bradford came together. It really did knit together the community in so many, many ways.
When you walk through a storm.
Even Jerry and the Pacemakers, Jerry Marsden, he came here.
You never walk alone.
I was involved in that. His agent came from Bradford and he rang me up and he said, Jerry's a big football supporter and we decided to do You'll Never Walk Alone. People came from all over to do that. Footballers, all sorts of people. It raised thousands of pounds.
Got to #1. Yeah. Well, so it should do.
For 3 years, I couldn't listen to the song You'll Never Walk Alone without crying. The record, whew, don't listen to that.
In the 10 weeks since the Bradford City disaster, money for the victims of the fire has been flooding in. A few pounds from groups of children, hundreds from pubs and clubs, and thousands from organisations and companies. Today it was a £60,000 cheque from donations to the Leeds Permanent Building Society that took the fund past the £3 million mark.
We never believed in the beginning, only some 2.5 months ago, that we'd actually reach a figure of 3 million. But we've reached it very, very quickly.
It was very successful in terms of how much it generated and also galvanising support and energies among supporters and the local population.
Well, this isn't Wembley Stadium, it is of course Ellen Road, Leeds, and we're here for what should be a marvellous occasion. There is of course a sad thought here because the teams wouldn't be here but for the tragedy at the Bradford City ground in May. And the reason the match has been put on here today is to raise money for the Bradford Disaster Appeal. Beautifully clipped pass out to Siggy Held, who just rolls it into the path of Emmerich.
There were people like Lothar Emmerich. Franz Beckenbauer came across to play in it especially.
Can we say first of all, thank you very much for coming over here for the disaster fund.
Yeah, that's a pleasure. It was a pleasure for us, and we will be very, very proud, to get us to play this game because of this disaster, because of the benefit reason. So we are very pleased to get asked, and we look forward to to play against our old fellows. Yeah.
Jeff Hurst, I think he got a hat-trick.
That's a good-looking cross for Jeff Hurst, who gets in a fabulous header. It's 4 apiece, and that was not dissimilar to the headed goal he scored in '66 from Bobby Moore's free kick.
A lot of the England World Cup 1966 team were here.
And it's been an afternoon of nostalgia for nearly 20,000 people here at Ellen Road. England have repeated their World Cup final victory of '66 by beating West Germany 6-4. It was all in the cause of the dependents of those who lost their lives at Valley Parade on May the 11th. It's been a day of jubilation and celebration in many ways here, with all these players rolling back the years, reviving the memories and showing us some very entertaining football indeed.
where it says city. You
Yeah.
see it, right? So we would usually have been probably somewhere at the bottom row of the C. And sometimes I couldn't see because you'd get a really tall man standing in front of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And Dad used to lift me onto his shoulders. And then when they were swearing, he used to say,
Shut your
close your ears. Yeah.
Doesn't seem like 40 years, love, does it? At all?
No. No, it doesn't.
This is nice to be able to come back to the ground and see it in its current glory, really, because it is a beautiful place now.
It's bittersweet, but it also feels a bit like a hug. And so to be here today is like a bit like flying the flag for Dad. So, and I'm proud to do that. At the back at an angle there. How's that? So much more than a name on a stone.
I know.
Oh, I know you do. I do too. I do.